Welcome, fellow simmers, gamers and tech enthusiasts. If you're here, you're looking to push your PC and your game and your sim to the limits. I'm the Flying Doctor, a hardcore simmer and self-proclaimed geek, and this guide is for everyone. Whether you are a seasoned gamer or simmer or a new enthusiast, there's something here for everyone. Today I've got one aim: to give you a better experience in simming or gaming by reducing stuttering, increasing your frames per second, and creating a deeper sense of immersion. We all know how frustrating it is when you're playing a game or a sim and then suddenly you get stutters. It just destroys that sense of continuity. Before we dive in, let's just remind ourselves of a couple of things, and perhaps those who were thinking, well, I know what there is to know, might be encouraged to stay with me. Firstly, this will be a reminder perhaps of some avenues for updates that you've not looked at in a while, and you might find that one update is a significant improvement whilst a previous update has been a huge disappointment. Secondly, we do need to be realistic and to think about our hardware. I don't want us to jump to conclusions like thinking you suddenly need to replace your graphics card, upgrade your CPU or build a whole new PC. Sure, it's true you can't expect miracles from outdated components, but if at one point you were getting decent performance and now you're not, or if you are in your sim and your game and you see hints of promise but it's not everywhere, this video is definitely for you. Welcome, let's geek into it. I'm going to walk you through some steps in detail. I'm going to break down the common pitfalls. I'm going to highlight things that users often miss. And as always, I need you to drop your tips and feedbacks in the comments section, because the Flying Doctor channel is all about community and supporting each other. So yes, my first point is step out of the game and think about how your hardware and the software that drives it is configured. Then think about your operating system. So the first thing is keep your system updated. Windows updates, press the Windows key and then press I. You'll find that you've got a settings screen that pops up. Go down to the bottom here, click on Windows Update, and you will find, look, lo and behold, I have got two updates that are due on my machine. I don't know about you, but I don't see much point in shutting my computer down and starting up again. I tend to have my computer on sleep. I need sometimes to restart my PC. There you are, you can see. What's happened here is that the updates I suspect have been loaded. Until I've restarted, I won't see any improvements. It matters because updates often include performance optimizations and compatibility fixes that enhance gaming. So for USB peripherals, your controllers, for example, across the board, you might find that there's a Windows update that solves a problem you are facing. The second thing is to look at your graphics drivers. So your graphics drivers drive the hardware that's in the graphics card. So it's a low-level software that you need to get right, and those drivers are updated regularly. If I, for example, go to my Windows key and into my search bar, if I just type NVIDIA here and I can click on that, there we go. Now, there's a lot of helpful stuff here, but the one thing you want to look at is drivers. If I click on driver, you'll see here that I've got installed GeForce Game Ready driver, and I know that I am up to date. It will tell me here, it's saying up to date here, it will tell me if I'm not up to date, and you can see that NVIDIA are regularly issuing updates, and there was a recent update in fact for Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. When you do opt for a reinstall, for example, if I click on reinstall, what you'll find is I get a pop-up screen requesting that I select an express or a custom installation. Doesn't particularly matter which one that you do, but if you pick custom, you can choose what elements of the installation you will take on board. The thing that I would say is click on Clean Installation, and that restores all driver settings and profiles to default. If you've got a difficulty, click on a Clean Installation and go in and make any other changes that you did before. If you are an AMD user, you need to use AMD's Adrenaline software to update drivers. The basic principle is the same, and don't forget to enable AMD's game profiles for optimized performance. You can also do that for NVIDIA as well. What do users miss? Not doing a fresh install and doing an install over old drivers, leaving behind conflicting files. That's a major issue. And then skipping optimal settings like enabling resizable bar or specific driver optimization for games. Some games will be recognized in NVIDIA or AMD, other games won't, but worth just having a check under the game optimization settings. As for what is resizable bar, well, bar stands for base address register, and it enables the CPU to access more of the GPU's memory at once, your graphics card memory at once. So that potentially means that you can see an increase in performance in games. But it's not straightforward. You might see it as an option, you may not. You may have to go into your BIOS to enable it. In fact, it's pioneered first by AMD and then chased after by NVIDIA. So yes, have a look out and a search around resizable bar. Apart from that, the graphics settings just here on NVIDIA give a geek's kind of playground anyway of some of the kind of settings you might want to play with to improve performance. One tool that seems very popular in terms of reinstalling your display drivers, particularly if you've had issues or you're moving from one graphics card to another, is to use something called DDU. And display driver uninstaller. So it's a driver removal utility that can completely remove the old drivers, every kind of semblance of an old driver before installing the new ones. And the important thing to remember with using this is that what you want to do is download it. You want to unplug the internet, because that what will happen is otherwise that you're at risk of the PC automatically grabbing updates that it wants. You want to restart your computer in safe mode. So you install DDU clearly to get rid of everything first, and then you can plug your internet in and then you can install your new driver. So DDU, a very useful tool, especially because sometimes upgrading from one graphics card to another, if it's in the same line and it's NVIDIA, relatively straightforward. If you're switching graphics cards, well worth using DDU. The second thing I would suggest you do is optimize Windows settings and enable game mode. So Windows key and I to bring up the dialog again. If I click on gaming here, you can see I've got game bar right at the top, captures, and then game mode. If I click on game mode, I can toggle it off and on. Do make sure that game mode is switched on. It prioritizes gaming performance by allocating system resources much more efficiently. What people miss is that sometimes game mode can occasionally conflict with non-gaming things running in the background. Test to see if by disabling it things actually perform better, but if it's not on, put it on in the first place. And some people don't realize that it's off by default unless it's been updated recently in Windows. It's off by default and you miss out on its benefits. So switch on game mode. Another thing to do is to switch on hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. Hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. And the way to do that is to go from System to Display, scroll down and go for Graphics. And it's easily missed. Under Default Settings, click Change Default Graphics Settings. If you do that, you find that you have Hardware Accelerated GPU Scheduling, which reduces latency and improves performances. Again, you'll need to restart if you change this. Important to know that this will not appear unless your graphics drivers are updated. Do test it. Give this a keep everything else the same, turn it off, switch it on again, see if that makes a difference. But hardware accelerated GPU scheduling. I've known some instances where this has got in the way and other instances where it's been really, really helpful. The next thing you might want to try is looking at your background processes. I'm just going straight into the search bar here, Task Manager. I just got onto View System Resource and Usage in Task Manager. If I just click on that, I'll drag that across because clearly it was on another screen as I was monitoring it. And you can see what apps that you've got open and what you've got in the background. You can tell how much is drawing from my processor and memory, and this is where you'll begin to spot where you have problems. If you click on these columns, you can make it easier to see in descending order what is drawing the greatest resource, be it memory, be it processing power as well, and demands on the network. So really helpful. This just in itself can give you an idea of what's going on and what might be blocking things in the background. All kinds of useful information here. You can also look at what is affecting your performance. You might find that you've got a hard drive that's struggling, for example. And also, this is particularly helpful what you have in your startup apps, because you might see in your process, you might think, what the heck is this? My system's actually pretty clean, and I do kind of keep an idea of what is running in the background. I like a clean system, but you're likely to see it here on task processes, but also you can see what your startup apps are, and this is crucial because you can disable or enable those startup apps, and a lot of things will start up on your PC. Sometimes stuff is downloaded or comes free with an install and you can miss it, and it doesn't need to be enabled. So you can see a huge amount that's disabled here in the background because I just think, well, I'll wait a second or two if I want to start it. For example, Adobe Creative Cloud, I don't need that on the background. The EA launcher, a games launcher, I don't need that in the background. I'm prepared to wait a couple of seconds. So there's a lot that is disabled for me, and then I let the PC run things when it needs them. The danger is that you have something running in the background. There's one that I don't want, Sim Market X. Just click on disable. There we go. So you can just keep an eye on this. It's unlikely that these are going to create a problem, but we all do like a clean and tidy system. One particular culprit for me has been cloud syncing apps in general. OneDrive, for example, it's enabled here because I wanted a file that was in the cloud the other day, but you can disable that. I mean, especially when you are looking to make sure that your internet feed is not disrupted, you want to do all you can. So yeah, I have found that some of the cloud updating systems can be a bit of a pain running in the background. So there are some more in-depth programs out there where you can really look and see what's going on underneath the hood in your PC, what's holding things up. And one of those, which I think is a great product, and I don't benefit from this personally, it's called Process Lasso Pro. Well worth the investment here. So what does this do? Well, you can see it's kind of a task manager on steroids. I've got active processes here, and I've got all processes here. But what Process Lasso lets you do is to put priorities into your system in terms of what you give greater focus on in terms of your CPU usage and in terms of your interfaces as well, right down to the number of cores that you allow a particular program to use. So really useful. One of the great things about Microsoft Flight Simulator here that you can see on the right for 2024 is that we've got all of my cores used. That's 10 plus 10 for me, running an i9. But the important thing is that you've got this priority class here. So I can't do a tutorial right now for this, but it really does add some finesse, and it will find things that are holding up your system. But even if you don't particularly want to stop them, you can say, well, I'll give that a normal priority and I'll give that a high priority as well. So you can see here, Flight Simulator 2024, you might not be able to see it, but I can tell you has a high priority. And whereas other things that are running in the background have a lower priority. For example, Little Nav Map, which I do use it as part of the sim, but it's just normal. And you can see it's a CPU affinity here. I can actually set out a profile where I actually choose how much of my CPU I'm using for different applications. So really, really useful bit of kit. Another piece of software that I found got in the way was some LED lighting software. You know, the kind of the little programs that come with your motherboard to control the lighting. I've never really found that they've worked very well for me. Always been really glitchy to operate, and sometimes more trouble than they're worth. I know we like our wonderful shining lights, but also you can find yourself having up 2 or 3 lighting programs at the same time, because you might have, for example, a keyboard that's produced by Razer. You might find that you've got a Corsair mouse or something else, and you find that you're amassing these different drivers for different peripherals, and they're overlapping in what they're demanding in terms of LED lighting. So really worth having a look at those and thinking, you know what do I really need, and then chopping off what is just causing problems in the backgrounds potentially. Okay, for my third point, so having looked at what could be running in the background that needs to be shut down, what about what is running in the background that is delaying things that you really need and it's difficult to spot? Well, a piece of software that I found really useful has been called Latency Monitor. It's LatencyMon. You can get it as a free download from Resplendent's software. Really great tool. It's just taken seconds to install, and no problems with the installation as well. You'll find all it'll do when I run it is it will click and it will tell me about what kind of latency I've got on machine if I click this little green button. So there you go. I'm running Flight Simulator in the background, and you can see I've got some all greens here. And what it's looking at is what software is running and how it's putting delays into your system. Now, I've had little pieces of software, audio software, or I've been able to dig deeper and found out it's like a USB device that the computer's talking to, because you can take all this information and sort of dig further and find out what's going on if you get red. So green's what you want. I've used this. It's been absolutely brilliant. I've used it for spotting why I'm getting latency in live stream, for example, and it's in that case it found an audio piece of hardware, and whether it was the hardware or the USB connection that was causing a delay, and that was holding everything up and giving me the stutters elsewhere. So really, really good piece of software here, LatencyMon. Why not just try it? And again, there's no benefit to me advertising this at all, but well worth it, yes. So audio interfaces, USB hubs can be the culprit of latency. Some of the telltale marks are not just the kind of disruption to frame rate, which you might see, but also audio crackling is one, delayed inputs is another, and LatencyMon can help you pinpoint where the culprit will be. So yes. And number 4, well, Microsoft Flight Simulator has grappled with this problem for some time. The great thing about simulation is that it builds a community around it, and an openness in that simulation puts a competitive streak into the market, because you have people producing content and add-ons, sometimes paid, sometimes not paid as well. If you've not had a chance and you're into simulation, go to flightsim.to for an example of that. What unfortunately that does is it introduces kind of more weight into the simulator and issues with incompatibility that Microsoft Flight Simulator and Asobo haven't really got control of. So the first thing is that if you're operating a similar game, you may well have add-on content, and if it's not particularly, if it's not tested by and verified by the software producers, well, it's not surprising that you could well enter into trouble, especially as simmers as we like to really press the boundaries of what is possible. And yes, if I go into my library at the moment, Asobo have got a real problem with compatibility of updates between Microsoft 2020 and Microsoft 2024. There are community add-ons that do work, but this has caused them a real issue. And even if you're running, say, Flight Simulator 2020, When the sim updated, many of us were simply copying and pasting the entire contents of our Community Add-on folder elsewhere, loading the base sim and then adding content and trying to spot where we have incompatibility. But you just have to accept that, for example, if you're running a very heavy scenery, that your sim may well run slow and that you need to change your graphics settings to do that, which is a bit of a disappointment, because if you've got glorious new scenery or a wonderful new aircraft, you want to run it in glorious graphics quality. But unfortunately, things aren't always that straightforward. Be mindful of Community Add-ons. Make sure that you're updating the add-ons as well and clearing out your system before. So I hope it won't be the same with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. You can certainly easily have all of your library content on a different drive, and when you do the upgrade, you can make sure you do the base upgrade without any of that added first. My fifth point would be, especially for flight simulation with Microsoft Flight Simulator, is to ensure that your internet connection is reliable. In fact, I would even say go for stability over speed. And also just be aware that although you might be able to get a quick download, this is not particularly quick here, I'm fiber, but I'm getting near 50 megabytes per second. I would say a 50 megabytes per second stable connection beats an unreliable 200 megabits per second connection. Also, avoid mobile hotspots or satellite systems, or just give them a second glance, because what you're really looking for is not just the download speed, but it's the ping time. So the ping time is the amount of time it takes for the signal to go from your computer to the center that's supplying your data and back again. You can see the ping in milliseconds is 19 here. Just watch that. Just be aware of that. A good ping time for gaming is usually between about 10 and 20 milliseconds for professional gamers, and 20 to 50 for average gamers. If it's over 150, then you're going to notice the lag. Yeah, and certainly that's true for video streaming. I would say, well, more over 50 can make things appear laggy. So a ping time of 50 to 100 can cause a problem. So it's not just how fast the thing's coming down the pipeline for you, it's the ping times. Do also check, go for cabled over wired, and do check the quality of your cables, because things do go loose. It's more likely that it'll be catastrophically loose, and cables do fall and get shut indoors and broken, but do check the quality of your cabling as well. But definitely Ethernet over Wi-Fi. It's also worth looking at your DNS optimization settings for faster responses. Consider using 1.1.1.1 or 8.8.8.8. I think I'll leave that there rather than kind of explaining it further. You can be like me and have built your own router. That's a whole other kind of area. But yes, look up your DNS optimization. You might want to change that. 1.1.1.1 or 8.8.8.8. Okay. So number 6, let's just talk about monitor resolution and display settings, where I can solve your FPS for you in seconds, really. Because if you lower your resolution, you can increase your FPS no end. The only problem is that a lower resolution on a monitor that's designed for, say, 4K is just going to look absolutely rubbish unless you run it in windowed mode. I guess you could run it, I've done it before, I've run things in windowed mode with a black background and a black window border, but it's not really where you want to be. Obviously, your graphics settings will be a case of what you want to compromise. I'm very fortunate here. I can run all on Ultra on a 4080 Super, but I have also worked with 3080s before and 2080s and wrestled particularly with 4K. So I like to think that I do kind of know what I'm sort of talking about. So first thing is that you're much better in full screen generally than in windowed mode for the native resolution. And the other suggestion is, if it's really getting to you, rather than upgrading your PC or your graphics card, you might want to seriously look at upgrading your monitor. And perhaps if you've got a 4K monitor, I know that's not great, it's going to really smart, isn't it? If you've got a 4K monitor and your graphics card is struggling with a simulation or a game, to actually think, no, I'll go and game at 1440p. But I'm still not quite confident. I think we are getting near 4K gaming, but up for a period, 1440p was the thing. So you might find it's cheaper to sort of upgrade your monitor, to downgrade your monitor, than to upgrade your graphics card. But well, we'll leave that for debate. But most important thing is your display mode wants to be in full screen. Things look rubbish if you change the resolution down, but there's a whole host of graphics settings. None of us really like compromise. We want to squeeze the most out of our GPU unit, but hey, life's not always like that. I mean, and it's kind of, you know, it's like what's next really, because I think, oh, I can do one screen at 4K. Can I do three? No, probably the answer is no. So yes, it's all about compromise, but look at your monitor resolution and your display settings. The one thing I would say is it's worth looking to adjust the refresh rate settings to match the monitor's capability. Now on here I'm actually running on a TV and it's going in at 60 Hertz, so there's not much point in me pushing out more than 60. So just have a look at that, 100% monitor refresh rate for me. Otherwise you're just wasting you know, the performance in a GP that could go to other things. So that frame rate limit can be quite significant there if you have a look and a play with that. I thought it was important for point 7 to look at some VR specific tips, and it's something that I'm interested in getting back into. I think I'd need sponsorship to do that, to be honest. I'd be interested in doing some testing if anyone's out there. However, people say, why wouldn't you do VR when you rather than, you know, once you've gone into VR you won't go back? Well, I kind of went back. I think I was an early adopter of VR, and what I found was that it felt like I had a brick strapped to my head, but also it was so immersive, genuinely. I didn't know what was going on around me. I have no idea what the kids were doing. And I also found that the setup was somewhat complex. And I think that really, from what I'm seeing and hearing, the setup continues to be quite complex from headset to headset. Basic point I would suggest, and I found when I was working with VR, is lower the resolution scaling and refresh rates to maintain smooth performance, and that tended to vary hugely from game to game. So yeah, if you are using VR, have a look on the forums, crucially on the forums, and have a look and see if there's any VR recommendations for your game or sim that you are using. But if anyone's out there and they would like to sponsor the channel in exploring VR, I think they're at the point that I can probably trust my kids now not to be wrecking the house whilst I've got the headset on. But they will take the mick anyway. Well, I have to get them to be encouraged as well. For number 8, resolution aside, what about the settings, particularly if you're running Microsoft Flight Simulator settings that are going to have the maximum impact on your sim viewing experience? Firstly, terrain level of detail. It controls the draw distance for terrain features such as mountains, forests and buildings. If you pop down to the bottom of the graphic setting screens under global rendering quality, you've got terrain level of detail here. And the suggestion is, or my suggestion is, you set it for between 100 and 200 for mid-range settings, and higher, even I've been playing about with it here, higher 300 if you are on a more capable system. The next one I would go for is volumetric clouds. This simulates realistic clouds and weather effects, but higher settings can really suck your GPU dry. Why? It's because clouds are rendered with complex lighting and shadow effects that put a strain on your GPU. So you may want to go down to medium or high and you'll see a significant jump. And ultra really is only recommended, I would say, for 4080, 4090s, that kind of league of GPU. The third is resolution scaling. Now, because I'm running a 40 series GPU, it's harder for me to demonstrate this, but usually you'll find your DLSS resolution under the anti-aliasing options, and it allows a game to render at a lower resolution internally, and then it upscales it to your monitor's native resolution. But on a 4080, you can see here I've got NVIDIA DLSS Super Resolutions, what it's called, and I can click through switching that on and off. So that's something that you certainly may want to play with. Certainly, if you're thinking quality is quality sacrificing performance. Performance is performance sacrificing quality. So ultra performance will give you a massive frame rate, but actually will give you noticeable blur or artifacts. Frame generation, if you have this, it's exclusive to RTX 40 series cards, uses AI to generate additional frames, but they're not real. Sorry, that's just me. They're about perceived smoothness. Works well alongside DLSS. So if you have a 40 series card. And FX sharpening, if you have this as an option, enhances image clarity after the upscaling. So it's paired with DLSS. So all of these can improve the look of your image, or they can make it sort of feel really cartoony if you're not careful. VSync stabilizes the frame rate with the monitor's refresh rate. So yes, it's worth looking at some of these settings. For number 9, I've not actually shown you how you can access and get an understanding of your frame rates themselves. There's two little tricks that I'd suggest that you do. Firstly is to load in the developer mode. It's under advanced options in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Developer mode, they're right there at the top, and then that will give you this top bar in the sim. If you go down to debug here and then rendering display FPS, you put that up, you'll see that I've got a display frame in the right hand side, and it's 60. That's right, it's held at 60 because that's the refresh rate of my monitor. That's all I've asked my graphics card to do. Another route for an FPS counter, if you're in Steam, and welcome to my healthy wardrobe here that I haven't touched in quite a while, you're able to go to Steam and then go to settings and click on settings, click in-game, and then you can switch on the FPS counter, top left, top right, bottom left. And you can also put it in high contrast, which makes it easier to read because it's transparent when you first view it. So that's how to do that. A little less detail when I look at this. I don't use Steam for playing Flight Simulator, but that's how you get just an FPS counter in Steam. So you can always switch that one on. Okay, Microsoft Game Bar, really difficult to show as another option. If you're running and you bought Flight Simulator from the store and you've got Game Bar installed, switched on, make sure you've updated it. It will show straight away if you go to Xbox for PC if there are updates available for you. Press the Windows key in G and you will open up the Game Bar dialog. However, it's really difficult to show on OBS. It doesn't record. That's for technical reasons, but I can video it on my phone and just show you what you get here. So there we are. It's a very simple readout. This is the Game Bar at the top, and you can see the orange line under the icon I've clicked, and then you can see below that CPU, GPU, VRAM, RAM and FPS. So there is a basic FPS counter within Game Bar. However, if you're using Flight Simulator, your best option is to go for the in-house FPS counter. Should also mention that other frame counters are available. First step might be something like MSI Afterburner. It's downloadable as an executable. You unzip it and then you click on the installer itself, and that will get you up and running. Main thing is to remember to install the statistics server as well, the Riva statistics server. You need that in order to get the FPS working, so don't forget that step. When it's installed, you'll actually find that you have a means by which you can really fine-tune your GPU and the memory and the voltage. I'm not going to go into overclocking here. and my view is it's only produced marginal gains for me. So there's two separate things going on here. Firstly is the MSI Afterburner itself, and the other is the statistics server. You need to work with both. Firstly, on the MSI, if you click on the settings hub, that opens up this dialog box, and if you go to monitoring, you're able to choose what you would like to monitor. If you click on each one of these here, then it goes to a deeper grey arrow, so in other words you can see the arrow rather than a shadowed arrow, and you can pick what it is that you would like to monitor in the software itself. So once you click on that, so it's GPU temperature here, but I don't want that, and memory usage, I don't want that, for example, but I am able to move down, and I definitely want don't need core clock, memory clock, power, percent, any of that light. I'm looking for CPU, just the core temperature. So there we are, CPU temperature there. I'm going to put that on. CPU usage. So that'll tell me what percentage use I've got of the CPU. And as a reminder, if I go down to the bottom here, I suspect, yes, CPU clock. See, that one's going to come on. RAM usage, yes, I will include RAM. You can see that you can put together your statistics here, and they'll not just show you the frames per second, but show you other factors as well. I've got frame rate, I've ticked frame rate minimum, frame rate average, frame rate maximum, frame rate 1% low, and I'm looking to just be able to recognize if I get a stutter, what's going on and perhaps where. So it could be that my CPU is overloaded, but there's lots of space to look in real detail. Once you've selected these, you need to go to apply. Let's just move down here as well. Just check all those are shown in on-screen display. Now, for the most of these, they will work. You may well spot that I've already got some running top left in my screen. There's another step that you need to take after you have applied all this. You'll notice that you only get sort of limited readouts coming from the top here. Not all of the stats we want are there. What do you need to do? You need to open up Riva statistics and do a little bit of work inside there. So if I go down to my taskbar here, and then I click right here on Riva statistics, this little dialog comes up. Very different dialog going on. And I need to click on setup, and you'll see properties dialog box coming up there. I select display maximum frame rate, and then crucially the one you want to look at is at the bottom here, percentile buffer. It says unlimited, put it onto ring. On-screen display support I've put to on here, and on-screen display zoom. This is really helpful because you'll find that you can't see what's on the screen, but if I take that off, there you go, you can see that we've got some details there. And I can change the position here as well, which is really useful because you'll notice it wasn't quite showing before. So if we pull that down there. Now the other thing I found out is if you go back into setup, enable benchmark mode, if you give that a couple of seconds and you OK that, you'll find that there we are, we've got our benchmarks, and these are with the highs and lows of the FPS. Frustrating thing is that there's no label for these, but it's easy enough to look at the monitoring, and you can tell by the order what they are. It's obviously CPU, RAM are quite clearly there, and these three are requested in order in the list that's down here. So this is quite a powerful tool where you can begin to look and try and see where those bottlenecks might be that are limiting what's happening in your sim. Let's talk about NVIDIA's offering. If you go to the NVIDIA app, you can find a new app, or new to me anyway, something called FrameView, which you can open. It'll have to install first if you've not installed it before. If you click on open, you'll simply find that, as you see here, there's a bit of a delay, and I have an offer to show detail on the left here, and you can see that there's a quadrant that I'm using. It's actually top right at the moment. It's not terribly helpful. I'd like to see things larger, but yes, you are able to capture a number of features here. there's more there by default that compared to what you'd see with other apps. So let's just break down this metrics mush that we've got on the right hand side here. So FPS, obviously frames per second. For what that means is for most players 60 frames per second is smooth gameplay. The next three figures, it says 90th, 95th and 99th, are percentile frame time. So 90% for the first one of the frames are rendered within that time or faster, so 56 milliseconds. Moving down, you've got 1% L, that's 1% low, that's 53, measures the average frames per second for the slowest 1% of frames. And a small drop from your average FPS suggests minimal stuttering. So yeah, that's fine. That's why this is not stuttering and nice and smooth. PCL, meaning NR is power cap limit and NR is not reached. So whether your GP is hitting its power limit or not will be indicated here. So there's plenty of power in the GPU still. We've just crashed in the background, but that's okay. So drop is number of dropped frames, and as you can see we've got 0 dropped frames. PPW is performance per watt. Higher values are better. So 0.25 suggests reasonable efficiency here for a modern GPU under load. In terms of GPU readouts, you've got a clock speed there, 2670. We've got a 90% there, which is it's working at 90% of capacity, and it's at 66 degrees, which is pretty cool. And the GPU, again, it's just telling me what I already know. It's running at 4.8 megahertz, but it's 38% and of total capacity, but also 77 degrees, which is not too bad considering it's a 10850K i9. So yeah, so that's what's occurring here. Not quite sure what the bottom W means still, so jury out on that one. Perhaps you might want to be able to tell me what that's about, but that's what's going on in the readouts there. So actually fairly helpful. Don't forget, just because the CPU is reading at 32%, the issue is what the core can manage at the speed that it is working on. Okay, I have done a little bit of research just very quickly, and I thought it would be worth just going through this counter. By the way, I will cover the other means of counting FPS, but I think for flight simulator users this could be very helpful. So firstly, the green up the top here or the red indicates whether the simulator is struggling in general. Green is green for go, all okay. Underneath here you've got main thread, so that is the main thread of the processor. Okay, if that's green, everything is all right. If it's labelled as limiting factor or going red, that's saying that the processor is struggling. Okay, and that's where you can find that if your processor is red and your GPU, as you'll see, is green, that's indicating that the processor is not able to work fast enough for the GPU. Okay, so green is operating efficiently, CPU is operating efficiently, red is experiencing delays. Render thread underneath is really interesting. Render thread is about the information that's being handled by the CPU and being processed and then sent to the GPU. If that render thread is red, it means that the CPU is struggling to produce enough information for the GPU to process. So if that is red, you're in difficulty, and it's to do with your CPU as well. We've got a slowdown in rendering tasks because the CPU is dealing with other stuff. Could be something going on in the background, could just be the ability of the CPU in the first instance. A major change from Flight Simulator 2024, as I mentioned earlier, compared to 2020, is that Flight Simulator 24 can use multiple cores. But still you are looking at the single core height as being the maximum that the sim can operate at. That's one of the defining factors, even though tasks can be shared, but much better sharing in 24 compared to 20, which is going to give an improvement for some people in frame rates. Okay, manipulators underneath there, that's the cockpit interactions and control port inputs that are going on. So high values here, if you've got red here, I mean you've got a delay in cockpit interactions and control inputs. That could well be down to the aircraft that you're in rather than the sim itself. Underneath you've got coherent GT draw. Yes, if you can make that out. One thing they need to change here is the text font. It's terrible on this. But coherent GT draw, what's that? It renders the HTML based elements that appear on the screen, including cockpit displays, and a high usage can affect the performance of virtual cockpits as well. Green is rendering well. Red is bottleneck too. So these two are to do with what's appearing in the cockpit itself. Under GPU, obviously that's the graphical processor unit, and that's the workload it's under. If the GPU is the limiting factor, this is going to go red. So you want to look to, is it red here or red here? It will tell you which part of your machine is struggling, and you're looking for a balance between the two. Underneath that, you have GPU compute, and that is the complex calculations here are things like shading and lighting. High values can obviously indicate that there's a lot going on in any. There's not much happening here in the background, but if I switch this to clouds, you'll find it's suddenly working really hard, and that's where you can get the slowdown. So when I talk about changing volumetric cloud, that's what's going on there. Bandwidth is about data transfer rates, especially when it comes to streaming scenery. So bandwidth there, I'm not getting any streaming going on. I'll keep an eye on this and report back on it later, perhaps a subject for another video later on. Detail adaptation is what that actually says there. Adjust the level of detail based on performance metrics, and obviously, so if you're telling the sim to compromise if it needs to on scenery or ELOD kind of loading, how much scenery is drawn, including objects, how close it's going to appear here. So detail adaptation is at 1. Still can't quite know what's going on, but green means okay. And fiber budget is an allocation of CPU time ahead of time for loading scenery and textures. So I don't really imagine that Flight Simulator is being run along other intensive tasks, but there's a budget within the program to allocate CPU time towards the sim itself. And so, yes, underneath here, you've got CPU memory and peak, and so maximum memory usage recorded during the session, and you've got the ability here to identify if memory limits are being reached. You can tell here there's a red going on there that I can see is one of the limits of many that we're up against. Again, I need to look at that in more detail, but that gives you an idea of what's going on. So what you're looking for is a red or green here, or a red or green here. If you're looking at a balanced system like mine, it's green and green, and as you put the pressure on, the differences will become clearer. And finally, if you manage to get all the way through that FPS kind of description, well done. I will put this separately in the comments section under the timeline. The final point, number 10, is monitor and manage your power settings. Why do power settings matter? Well, incorrect power settings can throttle your CPU or GPU performance, especially if you're using laptops or pre-built systems where balanced or power saver modes are default. And a bonus point, if I can share one, is that cooling is absolutely key. And if your cooler is not working efficiently, then that will throttle your CPU as well. So cooling counts. Anyway, let's look at how we adjust your power modes. Press the Windows key and the R key just on the bottom left there. You can see a little dialog has come up. I'm going to type in powercfg.cpl. So here we go, powercfg.cpl. Okay, press return and you'll find the power options come up. Well, that's a kind of geeky way of getting to your power options to start off with. That's a fair shortcut. And what you want to do is select high performance or ultimate performance. Now you can see here I'm actually balanced. Well, I don't want to be on that. Then I need to go down the bottom here and click on show additional plans. Not obvious. Click on that. There's a little arrow there to say. And you've got bitsum highest performance, which is the optimized CPU performance or high performance. I'm going to click on high performance and let that go. For laptops, yes, ensure you're plugged in. I know it's obvious, but if you're not plugged in and you're not using maximum performance mode, you're not going to get your most out of your laptop. I don't know how many people will run Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 on a laptop. It is possible, but yeah, anyway, worth knowing. What people tend to miss is that Windows tends to revert, or it has in my experience, it's reverted to default power plans after updates. I showed you earlier, didn't I, that I had an update. I've updated it, and that's what's happened. And also, you can configure GPU-specific power settings in an NVIDIA control panel or AMD Adrenalin. I mentioned before that the graphics options are a geeker's delight. Geekers? Is that a word? Geek's delight? Geekers. Anyway, doesn't really matter. Global settings, click on that and you can see I've got my graphics card set to prefer maximum performance. So there are little things that you can suddenly think, oh, I've forgotten to do that. And it can make all the difference. Don't forget also that if you go to program settings, you can set your driver settings per program. That's also something that's easy to miss, to make sure that you're getting optimal GPU utilization. I'm not quite sure whether Microsoft Flight Simulation jumps back into NVIDIA, and changes those settings when it's assessed at first what your system is capable of, whether it's working that way. But you can also change it the other way here. So you can see under Program Settings, Flight Simulator 2024, it does say unable to retrieve settings. Perhaps that's because I've played about with them, but you can restore them from here and you can make some selections. So yes, be aware about that. So folks, there you go. Upgrading your... So folks, I hope that you enjoyed that. I hope those 10 steps gave you at least some hints through to getting the smoothest sim demonstrations. That 3, 2, 1. And so folks, quite a lot we've covered there, haven't we? Right the way through from the very beginning to looking at making sure all of our Windows updates are in place, making sure that we are monitoring our... And so folks, as we fly into the sunset, I do love the quality of the graphics here. Whether you're a gamer or a simmer, I hope that what we've covered today has been helpful. Make sure that you work and step outside your game or your sim, think what's going on. Update your operating system. Update the drivers for your hardware. Have a look at your power settings, which is a later hint that I think I should have put on earlier. There's some really helpful tools out there to deal with latency that will help you find issues that you're scratching your head to try and identify where they're originating from. There's a whole host of hints there, including what you might want to shut off in the background and little programs that are causing delays, and perhaps that's flowing through to stuttering or things not working as efficiently as they can. You know, for example, programs that are also looking to draw down updates from the internet. A whole host of stuff. But yes, we've been down to trying to reduce stutters, increase FPF, and elevating your sense of immersion. If you found any of these tips helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to the Flying Doctor channel, and turn on the bell so that you know when I've produced more content. And don't forget, your insights matter. Drop a comment below if something worked wonders for you, or if you've got your own golden nugget of advice to share with everyone. Until next time, happy simming and smooth gaming if you are a gamer. Every blessing, take care, stay safe.